In this video, we are going to look at the structure of the task 2 of the IELTS in more details. So specifically, as I mentioned before, the structure is a very important part of the IELTS. If you get this right, there are high chances that you will get a really good grade. So you will need to write an essay, so you will have to focus on an introduction, the main body, that is divided in paragraphs, and a conclusion. This structure needs to be clear and to be visible for the examiner straight away. In the introduction, you will guide the reader, you will present your argument, and there are 3 specific steps that you can take to write a perfect introduction. So you would first write an affirmative sentence, opinion, argument, then a negative one, and then you will conclude the introduction with your thesis stance. So what is your point of view? What is the argument that you stand for and you want to discuss then in the main body? Remember to give more details about the objectives of your thesis, of the essay, and to guide the reader through what you're going to explore in more details. Let's look now at some specific examples. So phrase in favor. Many people are enthusiastic about space exploration. The phrase that it's against the first one. However, others think it is a huge waste of money. And then the thesis stance, where you highlight which side you're on. This essay will examine some of the arguments for and against space exploration, disagreeing with the idea that space exploration can benefit mankind. Another example could be phrase in favor. Space for many people is truly the last frontier. They are thrilled with the exploration and potential of space. Statement against. However, not everyone agrees that this money is well spent. Many people think that we should solve the problems here on Earth before starting our space journey. This is stance where you highlight which side you're on. This essay will examine some of the arguments for and against space exploration, agreeing that space exploration can potentially benefit humanity. So as you can see, you're very simply paraphrasing some of the parts of the delivery and giving your point of view. Now that we have written the introduction, we can move to the main body. The main body should be divided into 2 paragraphs. Usually one states a specific idea and the other one states the opposite idea. I strongly advise you to write in the second paragraph the idea that is the one that you're supporting, because in that case you will link it very nicely with the conclusion. Each paragraph will have a topic sentence that describes exactly what is the idea you're going to then discuss in the paragraph. So let's look at an example of a topic sentence. The internet helps us to become connected because it is accessible to everyone as social media are free. So as we can see here, there is a topic sentence in favor of a certain argument, and it really describes very well what is the idea we are going to discuss further in the paragraph. When then you start analyzing this idea more in detail, you will use example to support this thesis. A common mistake here is that many students think the more ideas they share, the better grades they get. Whereas, as we mentioned before, the quality is more important than the quantity, and we should just focus on one idea per paragraph. Another common mistake is not explaining idea in more details. That's because the student may think that the examiner already have knowledge behind that certain topic. But when we write the task 2, we always need to think as if the person who is reading has no knowledge about the topic. We have created a glossary that you can use for the terms that can come useful for explaining your ideas. Let's look at some examples. These are mainly linking words. So that is to say, in other words, this is because, the reason is, and as a consequence, and all the other linking words like however, on the other hand, nevertheless. It's very important to know all these synonyms and antonyms so you avoid using any repetition in your IELTS writing task 2. Another important thing about the explanation of the idea is that you do not explain just what is the idea, but you try to explain how the idea actually answer the question, the delivery. So every time you write a certain sentence explaining your ideas, you should always look back at the delivery and make sure that you're answering it. Let's look now at two main problems with providing examples. The first one is that you're not able to think of one, and the other one is that the example is not specific enough. A good thing about the IELTS is that you can come up with an example based a bit on your experience that you can think that everyone can relate to, because remember, you're discussing a general topic. Of course, when you then move to university, all the examples need to be taken from important resources, accredited resources, articles, journals, databases. But in the IELTS test, the examiner will not look and check if the example is actually real, because what they're looking for is your skills in writing. However, it's also very important that the example actually supports what you're trying to discuss, your thesis. And so really reflect on possible examples and how to explain them in a way that will clearly support your thesis. Let's look at an example. These examples may come from your personal experience. For instance, in Italy, Amazon has forced many bookstores to close. So you can know this from your personal experience, because you know people who has closed bookstores, or you have seen it in your city center, and you probably guessed that that is the case also in other countries, not only in Italy. Always remember, when you take an example from your personal experience, do not make it too personal. Because then it will not allow you to demonstrate a more general point that you're discussing. Try to avoid any generalization of stereotypes, because they do not really add anything, and sometimes they are too vague and just general phrases. Some of your examples may come from journal articles, from a news article that you have read, or from a TV show that talk about everyday issues. So feel free to cite any relevant resources like The Guardian, BBC, or others that you have read. This is a very important thing and can be united with your just general practice of learning how to read in English and how to get a wider vocabulary. So you can see how here you can connect the various parts of the IELTS. By reading news articles, you may have more examples for your writing. Try to avoid using any numbers, data, statistics. Leave the numbers for the task 1. Remember that task 2 is mainly argumentative, so use more general examples that do not have any statistics or numbers in it. And then let's focus on conclusion. There are 4 simple steps to make the perfect conclusion. Even though it can be easy to write a conclusion, it's the last thing the examiner will read, so it is important that it's written very well. First of all, always write a conclusion. It may be a very simple advice, but if you run out of time and you do not have time to write a conclusion, your grades will drop significantly. So in the conclusion, you should reaffirm your ideas, you should paraphrase a tiny bit the delivery and how you actually answer to that question. Another important thing, never write new ideas in the conclusion. This should be only inserted in the actual main body. And the final step, you can consider to briefly mention any future developments or implication of your topic. Let me give you an example. In an increasingly globalized world and dominated by Zoom, it is not unthinkable that online teaching in the future will completely replace face-to-face teaching. In the next video, we are going to look at another very important part of the IELTS writing task 2, which is the vocabulary. As you know, it's part of one of the evaluation criteria that the examiner will look at.